There hasn't been a single day since I've left where I have regretted leaving. Not one.
What is the most liberating decision that you've made since leaving corporate?
Everyone started getting fired. I was one of the last people standing. I was like, can I please get let go? And
what experiences do you feel like you had as a child that really shaped who you are?
just believing anything is possible.
What do you think holds people back?
100% of fear. I'm always out there exploring and being open and dreaming and doing and taking action. And I think that's the biggest difference between somebody like myself and others. Anyone can do it. It's just people don't.
If you had to choose between happiness and success, which would you choose?
So I value my happiness more than I ever have. I'm in a place where I have about 65 things going on all at one time and never been happier.
You are in for such a treat today. I'm so excited to introduce you to Christine Bridger. As soon as I heard her story, I knew I wanted to work with her, but I wasn't sure how. I kid you not, within 24 hours, Christine became a strategic advisor for 101 Ways Out. And I'm so thrilled to be on this journey with her. You're about to hear a story of a girl who grew up on a farm, going to a one-room schoolhouse, and then became a senior leader at some of the top PR and advertising firms in the United States. She became an Airbnb entrepreneur with cottages in Illinois and Michigan. And she also became a very successful consultant. She's also on a journey into her spiritual side. And I have learned a lot listening to Christine. She's fascinating. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. And stick around to the end because you'll get to hear some of Christine's tips for how you can live a life that truly lights you up. Talk to you soon. So thank you so much for being here. Let's just start by sharing who you are and where you are in your life journey at this moment in time.
Hi, I'm Christine Bridger. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat about my journey and hopefully it inspires other people to take some risks and some moves that they've been thinking about and pushing off just due to fear.
Yeah.
Where I'm at in my journey would be, I'm still learning and evolving and growing, but super proud of myself that for the past 7 years, I finally made the leap from corporate America that I had been putting off for probably at least 5 to 7 years before that. But I gave myself the goal of being 40 and then making that move. I did a bunch of dabbling and now I'm in a place where I have about 65 things going on all at one time. And it's fantastic because I always have something that brings me joy and I just put my energy there. And if something bounces and goes away, I've got other things to fill it up and making room for new opportunities. So that's a super high level of where I'm at. And then we can talk about any specifics.
I love that. I do want to ask you a specific question based on what you just said. I don't know if you get this feedback, but I want to say I first of all resonate with having 65 things going on at once. I'm similar because I feel like there's always something that I want to do or something new that comes up. And I'm like, yes, all of this is important. I do get feedback sometimes from mentors or other folks that have the best intentions that try to encourage me just to focus on one thing. Have you ever experienced that? And what's your take on it?
Yes. And that is, I've gotten that feedback as well. So my 65 things though are focused. When I made the jump from corporate America, the first exercise I did, because I had been living under a rock and just, grinding it out like we all do, I challenged myself to talk to 40 new people that I'd never spoke to before. And that was my goal for myself. Now, cut to the chase on that one. I only met with one and I had intentions to meet the 39 others, but I ended up getting what I call a lily pad job that kind of rescued me from corporate America. But I do think that that's awesome advice for somebody else who's like, where do I start? Because you just need to start talking and exploring and being open-minded because so many people have blocks where they're like, there's nothing else out there, or I've heard there's no one else hiring or all of these things. And that's definitely not the case. The other thing that I just was going to bring up that I did during my journey too was I did a dabble map, if you will. And I came up with that name on my own, I think. And I just started writing down all the things that I thought were interesting that I might be good at. And from there, I started to kind of write an overarching thematic for what I thought my journey might be able to become, and also to kind of give me some guardrails. So that way I didn't feel like I could only do one thing or that something was forever. I just needed to have some sort of a vision for my journey. And for me, what I had defined at that time was that I liked building brand experiences and fixing things that were broken. So whether that be old homes or working with, brands that were having challenges, like those were the things that brought me joy that I was really great at. I've narrowed it down even further. And now I'm doing all of that, but in the health and wellness space, which is also near and dear to my heart because part of my journey personally has been to continue to work on my mindset and my health and wellness and just make sure that I feel balanced and healthy so that I can live a long and enjoyable life.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to your experience in your corporate career. Tell us what you were doing in corporate America and if there was a defining moment that you felt was a breaking point for you, or if it was just a gradual process where you kind of felt like I need to make a change, and how did you decide that?
I have an interesting, upbringing or childhood. Most people are surprised. They see me living in Chicago and, traveling out to the coasts and working with big brands. But the reality is I grew up on a farm in Nebraska and I had, I couldn't see any neighbors and I had very limited amounts of friends, not because I was somebody that nobody wanted to hang out with there, or I didn't want to hang out with people. There just weren't people. So I ended up going to a one-room schoolhouse, and that was, Little House on the Prairie. It absolutely was just like that. And I had only 2 or 3 people in my grade. And that actually was the largest class we had because there were only 12 students in K through 12. We had 1 teacher and there were 2 boys out of those 12. And so they got chased around on the playground. So it was definitely an interesting experience for me. And I think my creativity had to be born out of that time because there was nothing around. So if you wanted to do something, you had to create it and you had to have an imagination. And I think actually that's one thing that kind of bums me out with my kids is they have everything. And so, they're like, oh, we're bored. And I'm like, you're bored? I'm like, gosh, you should have seen, how I grew up. But anyways, that was how I spent my childhood. And then I eventually moved to Ohio for a small little stint in high school. And then I went to college in Detroit, Michigan. I went to a private art school. And, I really didn't have great grades in high school. And then when I got into something that was interesting to me, I was on the dean's list and did super fantastic. And I didn't have a normal college though, because, it was an art school. So there weren't any sororities or, normal parties or activities. It was just 100% focus. I went to Center for Creative Studies. It's one of the top design schools. And I was fortunate enough to graduate from there and pretty much have jobs I didn't deserve right out of school. I first took my first job out in LA. I was a lead designer leading, very talented people who had much more experience than me. And I had never done a website. And I just remember being in my garage reading 101 for Dummies, how to build a website, just crying like, how did I get this job and what am I going to do? So that's kind of how my journey started with always filling bigger shoes. And I just stopped.
That moment when you realize that you can't keep living the way that you've been living? Probably heard several of my guests talk about that already. If that resonates with you and you're feeling like you're in that moment, you're in luck. I've created a 30-day program that's going to help you become unstuck, reconnect with your joy, reconnect with yourself, and reconnect with your values. We're going to work together to figure out your next step, your vision, and your path forward. This is an invitation for you to live the life of your dreams that truly lights you up. Visit 101waysout.com to get started. What led you to Ohio for high school?
Actually, that was just my father getting a different job. And so we relocated there for 4 years and still, again, in a similar farm setting. So new farm, limited people, but there was, more than where I was at a one-room schoolhouse.
So did both of your parents work or just your dad?
They both did. So my father was an engineer. My mother was a teacher, just the, stereotypical Midwest, upbringing. And I've always been around women who worked. My grandmothers both worked. And I've just, only seen that. And my mother and I would spend a lot of our time doing crafts together. And even at a young age, I had multiple businesses. I was the youngest porcelain doll maker in Nebraska. I made Christmas ornaments that I thought that I was going to make millions on. Although I hadn't thought about distribution, I only had one store that I didn't even know if they would sell them, and they didn't. So that that business didn't go well, but it led me to all of my other entrepreneurial ventures of eventually having a woman's clothing line that actually did become very successful. And I think back to, where that started with making little clothes for dolls and eventually rabbits.
That's amazing.
Again, when you live in such a rural areas, you start, I guess, making dolls and rabbits. What else do you do?
Yeah, it's so cool. Okay, that kind of leads into this next question, which is, what experiences do you feel like you had as a child that really shaped who you are?
Well, definitely those. I would say I was just always creating, and I always liked my space to be nice and clean because I felt that I couldn't enjoy relaxing if I was in a messy environment. And I've been making my bed since I was a child. I just always believed that if I make my bed and I have a nice space, that my day is already off to a better start. So I don't know where that came from, but I've always had that as part of my routine. I would say the other thing that shaped me is just talking to people. And I always was just curious and always just struck up conversations. And I learned so much at an early age that around how people think and different lifestyles, and just developing a level of empathy and curiosity that I continue to leverage. Yeah, I just like hearing people's stories and like finding connections, because everyone is connected if you dig under the surface. Probably another thing from my childhood that has shaped me is maybe just believing anything is possible to a point where some might call delusional or ridiculous. I just always thought it was possible, or maybe it's because I was naive, but I still continue to not limit my beliefs. It gets harder as you get older because I've seen where my life has taken me, and it's nothing less than amazing and sometimes feels like a miracle. And people will say, oh, you always have stuff land on your lap. No, I don't. The reason it seems that way is because I'm always out there exploring and being open and dreaming and doing and taking action. And I think that's the biggest difference between somebody like myself and others. Anyone can do it. It's just people don't.
Yeah.
Or
that's so interesting. What do you think holds people back?
100% of fear.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of worst case scenario. And I do understand, because I've definitely been there. I haven't just always jumped off cliffs. And it took me a bit longer to make my move out of corporate America. I think the financial, stability. People think, oh gosh, if I go off on my own, I might only make this if I'm lucky and it won't be consistent. Or what if I this, or what if I that? But it really just takes some exploring and faith, and staying in a positive mindset, believing that things will work out, and knowing that there's actually a bigger opportunity that you could never imagine for yourself. People just refuse to believe that. They think,
yeah,
I know exactly where my path is going to be. It's A to B to C, and it's, they think they already have the answer, which is a bummer, because there's something so much bigger and better and interesting out there for everyone.
That is so beautiful. So tell me about your decision-making process. So you actually, let's take a step back. So you moved to LA for this incredible opportunity for your first actual job out of college. And then what happened from there?
Yeah, well, it was quite interesting because I really had never been to California, and sounded cool. But being from the Midwest, when you get out there, you realize, especially in LA, you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a culture shock for me, where, everybody is kind of looking to get something from someone. And I'm like, I don't have anything to give. In fact, I don't even know how to do my job. So, I had a hard time meeting friends because everyone was in the industry. And here I was, working at this web company. It was a good reputable, company. Its name was Rare Medium. And again, I thought I was going to be a billionaire because I had a bunch of equity. And I was on, then the dot bomb, I just watched my equity go, and I'm like, oh no, what happened? That wasn't supposed to happen. And then everyone started getting fired. And I was one of the last people standing. In fact, I think I was the only employee at one point. And at that point, I was like, can I please get let go? And, because that's never fun. So I was really only out in LA for just under a year. And I was very homesick, and I knew that, I just couldn't feel settled there. And so at the time in my mindset, I couldn't enjoy the moment because I couldn't picture myself there long term, which in hindsight, which I try not to, have regrets or anything like that. But I do wish that I had just been a little bit more open to, just living in the moment, not worrying about what's next. But it was really hard for me at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you move back to Ohio?
I actually moved back to Detroit because I fell in love with Detroit. I lived just in a Grosse Pointe, kind of a neighboring town to Detroit when I was in school. And so I wanted to come back there as kind of I keep saying the word lily pad, but it's like anytime I make like a big move, I'm like, now my mindset is just get to the lily pad and then find your next move. And so I looked at Detroit as my lily pad and my comfort area. And I knew I wanted to go to Chicago. I just needed to line up a job, which was no problem. So kind of from there, I ended up just finding other creative leadership positions at some of the big agencies like Digitas, Razorfish, and Critical Mass, and did that for 13 years approximately. And then even at that point, I was leading a business, and I was, had all of these like responsibilities that when you're just trying to get to the top, you don't realize that, oh, these aren't as fun as I thought they were going to be. I thought it would be really cool to be at the top. And the reality is it's very, very different from the creative occupation that you think you're going into.
Yeah. Yeah. So that must have been a strange shift for you because you're doing this creative work. And then all of a sudden, like as you get promoted, as you have more responsibility, you're no longer creating.
Yeah, it's true. And then, all these things are broken and you're kind of looking up like, hey, help. And it's like, oh my gosh, nobody else is up there. It's me. I'm the one who's supposed to like have all the answers. And, and that's kind of a whole thing that you're not expecting to encounter. And then when you do, you're like, okay, time to, put on my pants and do the work and, have the answers and be that person that other people can look up to, which I loved that aspect of the mentoring and everything. But I think, you're trying to, I had a young family and it's like, I was just absolutely exhausted. So I wanted to make the leap at that point, which I guess, my math, how long ago was that? That would have been like 14 years ago. I wanted to make a leap then, but I didn't. I guess sort of made a leap, but it wasn't as far of a leap as I wanted to make. Well, I was at a major breaking point at my last agency, which was Critical Mass. And the reason being, it was just too much. And I saw no way out. And so I remember driving home and I was just a puddle and I was kind of talking to myself because I didn't know one else to talk to. And I said to myself, literally out loud, like a crazy person, I am going to try to find a therapist that I can talk to. I'm going to call some friends. I'm going to talk to a psychic. I do not care. Whoever answers the phone first. So I'm on my way home and call some friends. Nobody answers. Try to see if I can get a quick appointment with a therapist. No. But a psychic answered the phone. I was like, great. So I had this long conversation with her and she said some things that were really interesting to me. And we had just a tiny little back note. My husband and I had just renovated this cottage in Western Michigan that I was super excited about spending time at. And so that was going to be my like recharge and have something lined up along with my corporate world. And so when the psychic said to me, like, I said, tell me, do you see anything in my career? Is there any hope for me? Is there something different on the horizon, please? Yeah, actually there is. I'm getting for some reason, Virginia's coming up. And I'm like, what? That is not what I want to hear. I didn't say this out loud. I'm just listening. But in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, So I just get done with this, my little like safe haven in Michigan. And now she's telling me my opportunities in Virginia. I'm not uprooting my family. I'm like, then I did say like to myself, is J. Crew out there? Because maybe if J. Crew's out there, I would consider it. But I was like, no, there probably isn't. So I kind of hung up with the phone. I was kind of bummed about my new opportunity. Next day, I'm sitting there and phone rings and it's a recruiter that I used to work with at a past agency. Hey, how you doing? Terrible. And he's like, I have such this. He's like, well, it sounds like it could be good timing because I have such the perfect opportunity for you. I know you'd be perfect. They'd be perfect for you. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, it's at this company that's spun out of Interpublic Group as a conflict shop. It's a PR company and they want to build a content practice. And I'm like, how do you mean content practice? I'm just like, that's kind of vague. He's like, well, I don't know. I mean, you can kind of make it whatever you want, but you'll love the woman who you'd be reporting to, the president. Her name's Virginia. I was like, oh my God, that's my job. I was like, I don't even know. What are you talking about? Build a content practice? Because at the time, it was still unclear as to what the whole content and social and everything was. So I took the job. I was like, I don't need a job description. I don't even need to know anything. I just put those pieces together and I felt that was my spot. And I was there 7 years and I put definition to my role. I did build a content practice, a digital offering and social media and influencer, which ended up transforming the way that the PR company was able to bring in revenue and do business because they were losing so much on the traditional side. And the negotiation for me to go there was like, I'll come and I'll do all this, but I'm only working 4 days a week so that I have a better work-life balance. So again, kind of a lily pad, but not as bold of a step as I wanted to make. And I did that for 7 years and then I turned 40 and I was like, that is it. And I went off on my own and now I'm doing 65 things and never been happier.
Okay, so I am sure this is not a surprise to you, but as soon as you said you got that call the next day, I literally got goosebumps like all over my arms. I was like, whoa, how does that happen? Well, it seems like you like getting to the psychic was the right person that you were supposed to talk to in that moment.
I think so. I mean, that's just totally wild. I've never met anyone with that name. I've never been to Virginia. So the whole thing was just too magical.
Wow, no joke. Side note, do you ever talk to that psychic anymore or did you talk to her ever again?
Yeah, I did. But now I've got like 12 that I talk to.
Okay, I definitely want to hear all about that.
I do.
Okay,
I talk to them a lot.
I don't want to skip through your story though, because you have such a fascinating life that you've led. Even now, starting at this point of you turning 40 and like, okay, I'm making this change. Why 40? Like, why was that the deadline for you?
I guess in my mind, it was 10 years past what I felt I should already have done. And I felt like, good Lord, Lordy, look who's 40 over the hill. Like when I remember my parents like celebrating like the old fart, like the whole thing, like 40 was like super old. And so for me, I just had that picture in my head and I was like, you've got to be mature enough. You're an adult to be able to make a move like this. And I felt like if I don't know, I guess I kind of like just the visual of 40 versus like a 38. I don't know, or a 36. Really, those dates just didn't happen because I was a chicken. But I just said I had to have a light at the end of the tunnel for myself to even make it through what I was doing. So I felt like if I just gave myself a goal, that I would keep marching towards that goal, knowing there was an out. And if I didn't, I would keep pushing back, which I already had pushed back.
So what was it? How were you feeling leading up to that deadline? Like what was going on for you emotionally and mentally?
I mean, I literally pictured myself, I'm scared of heights as well. So I pictured myself jumping off a cliff. And I was in Provence, lovely place to be when you're trying to figure out your next chapter, but you're also spending money and drinking rosé. And then I went to the most expensive city in the world. I went to Paris and I met my husband and I told him I booked a meeting with HR for Monday when we get home and I'd like to resign. And he said, what? Oh, okay. He's like, did you run the numbers on it? And I'm like, yeah. And they look really bad. I was like, I can't figure out how, this is all going to work out, but I'm going to keep crunching numbers and being creative. And this is kind of a side note, but I do a lot of creative financing where things shouldn't work and I figure out a way to make them work. So everything that I've done, which we'll talk about in a moment, has all been, self-funded, and just there are ways to make things happen again when you feel like financially it's not possible. So I've gotten really scrappy with everything. And one of those things that I had done in parallel was renovate old cottages in Western Michigan and turn them into rentals, and kind of came up with a formula. So I've always had different efforts running alongside of my corporate job as well, so that I didn't put as much emphasis on finding my happiness only from my day job, if you will. And that also made it a little bit easier for me to slide out, is because I ran things in parallel, and at least I had some things to continue to bring in little bits of money, or at least, have me feel a little bit more grounded than just plopping into, the land of nothing.
How long have you been doing the renovations and rentals?
16 years. It's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. I started our first Airbnb. We do Airbnb, right? So I started our first Airbnb in 2014, I think it was. So 11 years. So not as long. And yours are beautiful, by the way. So I will link to your website. I mean, oh my gosh, I looked at you have such beautiful work that you've done.
So much.
It's so cool. So did you ever think that the rentals would be what you would do full time, or no? Is it always just a side project?
Yeah, I did. I came up with a couple business models where I was going to, I also got my real estate license as part of my, dabbling and seeing what I might want to do. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I failed my real estate exam 4 times. And it's because I was overthinking everything. And I was trying to make part of the, question and story that didn't exist, and it was screwing me up. I'm also just a terrible test taker, but I ended up passing only because I had had too much wine the previous night before, and I almost forgot about my test, and then I didn't have time to overthink it. So I passed it. And what I was going to do with that piece was, I had a business model where I would go and find a home for people to purchase that would be a total gut. Then I would be doing the renovation, and then I would help them actually set it up as an Airbnb. And what I realized by actually going through that process is, wow, working with people for that long and getting other people comfortable at taking risks is no fun. And so I quickly realized that I liked only one client, and that was myself. So I went back to just working on these homes for myself. But one of the things that I did, a model that did work for me was, and this gets back to the creative financing, is I was like, I've worked for a very long time in corporate America, 20 years at that point. Certainly I can leverage something to help me with monetizing these rental properties. And so when I was doing these renovations, I realized that brands didn't have much opportunity to be a part of bigger lifestyle stories and magazines and press. And they would get these like roundups where they have just a product sitting next to another product. And, it's not that interesting. But when it's part of a lifestyle experience, it's much more compelling to the end consumer. And so I started cold calling all these brands, and I showed them my body of work. And I said, I'm going to pitch all these top tier magazines. And if you want to be a part of it and you'll donate product, then, I'll have you featured in there. And so I ended up getting the first magazine I contacted, pitched an idea of doing a multi-series renovation that would show up in all these, in their whole annual publications. And they had never done that before. They were always single stories, and this was a multi-part story. And so when I got that, it was really easy for me, because then I just called brands like, hey, I've got 6 features throughout the year in this big magazine. Do you want to be a part of it? I'm telling you, I got probably over $250,000 worth of product donated.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
For one, and I'm talking like siding, insulation, beautiful Pendleton blankets and Sonos speakers, and even Canada Goose jackets for my family for the photo shoot. And it was really amazing. So I ended up replicating that a few other times, and ended up, getting equity in these, all these renovations from brand sponsorships, and then got featured in my childhood dream magazine, kind of connecting back to Nebraska. I would be sitting on the front porch on a porch swing with my mom, looking at country living, just in awe of everything I saw. And so to get the front cover of that magazine as an adult is like, I've peaked. So yeah, I'm just always, trying new things. And from that, actually, we started getting, when was this? I guess 5 or 6 years ago, my husband Gabe and I were getting contacted by producers. All of a sudden, just people seemed to be interested in what we were doing. And we signed on with a production company, and we were working on a pilot and to have a show on HGTV or with the Magnolia Network. And so that was really interesting. And again, it's something you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And I secured, all of my company. It was called Company and Cottage. And it's all about surrounding yourself with a company that you want to keep and things that you love. So that's why it's not Cottage and Company, which, people kind of were thrown off by it. I was like, no, it's intentional. It's all about the company and what you surround yourself with. And it was a beautiful brand. And I had developed all these lifestyle products and entertaining products. And I'd worked with a lawyer to get everything secured because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going big. I'm like the next Chip and Joe. And so we did all of that. And COVID happened. And I also got I had a walk with, it's funny how life is all intertwined, but I was on a walk actually with my first phone call guy, who I told you was my lily pad out of corporate America that hired me on to do some consulting to one bigger business. And he said to me, and it wasn't even anything to do with what I was exploring. He's like, the older I get, I realize that I just like living a life that's more anonymous. And all of a sudden I was like, I can't re-sign this deal with this production company. And COVID happened anyways. And something in my gut was like, don't do it. And I didn't enjoy the film process. I'm like, wow, we just filmed for like 150 hours and we got like 2 minutes of film. It's crazy. I'm going to have like no life. And I kind of got a flashback to when I had my fashion business and it took off. And I was like, whoa, this fashion industry is nasty. And, I just kept finding myself in these areas that I knew I wasn't going to be happy in. And so I bounced out before I got in too deep.
When were you doing the fashion business?
So I did that after I was desperate to just get into a job that wasn't the LA job. And I left Detroit, came to Chicago and got a job. And it was very boring, and it was not keeping my interest. But again, like everything, it paid really great. And so you could just kind of like suck it up. So that's kind of where I started doing things on the side. And I started a woman's fashion line called Doris Ruth with a friend of mine whose husband actually got diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And so I was doing it initially, not as thinking of it actually being a business, but kind of back to like doing craft projects with my mom. I was like, let's just make some stuff. And we did. We made some stuff, some nice shirts out of like vintage other shirts. And we had a friend who was maybe you would consider a socialite in the area, and she wore our shirt. And the biggest boutique owner in the area said, who are you wearing? And we had come up with a name just for fun. I don't know why we did. And she's like, oh, I'm wearing Doris Ruth. And that was named after our maternal grandmothers. And our tagline was, please be kind to wear with heels. And it was kind of around like the Sex and the City, where the brooches and everything was girly. And so she wanted to talk to us, and she said, can I have their number? So she contacts me and she's like, I want you guys to come in, bring your whole spring line sheets. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Hang up. I'm like, what are line sheets? And like, we only have like 2 shirts. And what are we going to do? And our friend's wearing one, the only, I don't know where the other one is. So we looked it up and we started drawing line sheets, and we went there. And at that point, when she was like, I'd like to pick it up exclusively, I had turned to my friend who also didn't know what we were doing. I'm like, I don't think we should. I think we have something. Let's not like go exclusive. And she's like, are you sure this is like the best boutique? So kind of from there, we got a really ugly chemical suitcase and built, samples. And we went out to New York and rolled in to meet up with Barney's and Henry Bendel and all the like high-end boutiques. And the way that we even got in those, again, was just not caring what anyone thought, or not trying to do what is the typical how to get into the fashion world space, which I think made us more charming and of interest, because we are these 2 Midwest, people who had no business being in the space. And I just cold called. I looked up like Tracy Reese and other brands that I liked. And I looked to see where they were sold. And I just called and I'm like, hey, we're coming into town. And then I looked up a boutique down the street that was a high end one. I'm like, I'm giving you the opportunity to meet with us before we meet with them. And that was working. And we were just getting every call we made. They're like, cool, come in. And we just blew up. And then we had tons of the, celebrities back in the day, Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, Carmen Electra, all the people wearing our stuff. And we ended up getting on in all the magazines there and distribution at all the big retailers. And then we realized the manufacturing was terrible. The fashion industry was tough.
Wow. What made you exit the business?
So why we got out of it was because I think the deeper in you get into certain things that you think you're going to love, the more you realize that you might not.
Yeah.
And the fashion world is really exciting and cool, but it also has a really dark side to it that I did not like. And I just kind of saw myself getting sucked into it. I mean, it was all consuming. And I also realized that, in order for us to make a ton of money, I mean, from the outside looking in, it was like, wow, how can anyone replicate this? This is so amazing. But we weren't making money because even though our clothing was, high-end couture, it was still like making custom clothing for people. We needed to actually fix our manufacturing and probably go overseas, which I wasn't really excited about doing, but it just wasn't profitable with how we were doing it. And then we needed to have showrooms on each coast and all of the stuff. So I at the same time, I had this, thriving career running in the background. And I kind of just made a decision. I will also say I made a poor business decision. So for me, this was like going back to business school. I hated the financial side of our business so much that I thought it was a great idea to take 45% of the company. And then my partner was going to take 45%. And then her husband was going to take the 10%. To me, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Probably like an hour later, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Wait, I don't have majority, vote. So you're young, you're stupid, and you're just kind of not thinking about how something might scale. So that's a huge learning for me is no matter what I do, I always start with the biggest, most grandiose, wonderful, and horrible things that could happen and build your contracts based on that. I also just don't get into partnerships at all. I've stayed a consultant. I'm working actually with a mutual contact of ours right now that I, could go full time at, and I chose to just stay as a consultant. And I had a really successful agency. I still do. And I remained as I have my own separate LLC. It just works better for me. I think I've learned that, you have a little bit more control and fluidity in your moves and decisions. So,
yeah. Okay. I want to ask you this question, and I don't mean this question to be offensive in any way.
No, sure.
You've had so many amazing successes and you've been so gutsy about the things that you've done. And we haven't even talked about your consulting thing yet, which we will. Any failures that stand out? Like, has there been anything you've been like, oh crap, that didn't go the way that I thought it would, and it kind of shook you, or has that just not been part of your story?
Oh, I mean, every single thing, even the stuff I've talked about that seems really exciting. I mean, there's been failures in all of it. I think, I literally everything that I've said has had a failure or 100 attached to it. But I think the takeaway for me is that failures are fleeting.
Yeah.
And there's something I really have an awesome mindset about failure. And it's not a failure. It's what lesson can you take away from it? And what is it opening up a door to, or, opening up time to put towards something else. So for me, I can see it so clearly with all of the failures that happened in my past and how actually wonderful that failure was, and opening up a new path that I wouldn't have found if I had just stayed kind of in a comfort zone, just kind of, churning and, heads down under a rock. So, yeah.
I had a feeling, not that would be your answer, but that you'd have some sort of answer that would be more mindset oriented around how you looked at things like that, because everybody has failure, right? We all experience many failures as we kind of, especially when we go out on a limb and we try to do things that are different, I think.
Right.
You just get bigger failures. Sometimes they're a little bit more public failures. And so I was just really curious about that experience that you've had and kind of how you've framed it for yourself, because you haven't let it kind of define you in any negative way. You've kept going and you've done amazing things. So clearly there's some sort of takeaway there in terms of how you kind of how you react to setbacks. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm a more interesting person, that I've had failures and that I've learned from them and that I can help other people, which is truly what I love doing, because I think that, I don't know if it's because I'm a firstborn or I was a pioneer on a farm or whatever it is, but I have pushed myself to make some moves that other people wouldn't feel comfortable doing. And so then for me to be like, well, look, I've landed on my feet, and it hasn't always been easy, but I've done some really wonderful things. And I know this is kind of a morbid thought, but my father passed away, and I went through that whole experience with him, and my sister and I, came out on the other side of it even closer than we were. And it was actually kind of a beautiful journey to be a part of. And I even said to myself, you know what? I've lived such an interesting and fulfilled life that even if this is, all I had on earth, I would feel really happy and grateful and content with it all. And so I always encourage people, just don't put it off. And just back to like renos, people are like, oh, well, we're thinking about doing this, but we'll probably wait. And I know sometimes really you have to wait because of money, but I'll often say, well, don't you want to enjoy it? And same with like retirement.
Yeah.
Could always be saving more. I should always be saving more. But I'm also like, what if I get a bad hip? What if something worse? I want to enjoy the parts of my life. And one of the things that I do that's a passion and a hobby is I entertain and do cheese boards as a creative outlet. So I always want everything to be not for anyone else. I'm not trying to get in a magazine at this point or anything like that. And I'm not even doing anything with my content that I'm, capturing. It's just purely to create a magical moment and have really great memories. And so come up with themes and really just go all out. I have a dinner club that's made up of 5 couples, and everybody does a course, and the person who's hosting comes up with a theme, and we get dressed up. And a lot of it's based around travel too. Like if we went to Thailand, we'll come home and do a Thai dinner, and everyone will wear something, Thai inspired, and even the decor. And then we each have a course that we make from a menu. And then we go around and we, speak about the culinary experience and inspiration, and they're just beautiful. And so I just always am looking to make things special and interesting, because if you don't create it, it doesn't happen. And so.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's so true. Okay, let me go back, and I want to go into your consulting experience that you had after you left corporate. But before we get there, I want to know 3 questions.
Okay.
What did you do to prepare? So why don't we just go into that one? Because then I feel like I don't want to throw everything at you at one time, because there's a lot.
Well, my memory who knows? I could forget all 3 of them at once. Okay, so how did I prepare to leave to make that?
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's kind of like when my parents got divorced, and they ended up being able to get divorced and be friends immediately. It's because it had been a long time coming.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, is I had been thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. But how I prepared again is to come up with a date. I just had to have a date, and I had to ingrain that in my mind. The other thing I did, which you might not hear people say, is I started telling everyone about that date to hold myself accountable. Because then it wasn't just being a failure or disappointment to myself. It was kind of like, hey, what happened? And we're here on November 15th and thought you were supposed to not be working in corporate anymore. So I vocalized it, put out a press release. Hey guys, did you hear? I'm leaving. And then I started getting my financials in order. I was looking around, and I was, one of the few women that was actually still working while everyone else was having babies. And I'm like, I know I'm in the North Shore and there's some money, but how are all these people making this work? Well, the reality is what I had discovered through, having heart-to-heart conversations is you stop putting money away into savings. You're not saving for college. You turn off the 401k. You do all the things and you have yourself a moment to breathe. And then I came up with like the absolute smallest amount that we could afford to live on without having to move into a box. And that became a more digestible goal. And then I found that lily pad job that doesn't have to be perfect, just something that allows you to make that, whatever that amount of money you need. And then I just jumped. And, I had not a huge savings at the time, but enough where I was like, okay, between the little amount that you're making, you've probably got 6 months, go. And
that's amazing.
The one thing I would say, I would give this advice to people. When I tried to leave, my boss is and was wonderful and so supportive and everything. But she was like, hey, can you stay 8 weeks? And I was like, ooh, gosh. And in my mind, I was like, oh, well, I can stockpile more money, because I had an executive job. I was like, oh, this could be good. But when you're really ready to go, that 8 weeks felt like 8 years. And I didn't want to let, my boss and my friend down. So I did it. I wouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wish that you had known before you left?
Well, it would have been nice if I had been further along on my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
We release fear and control and trust the process, because I really was scared, more scared than I needed to be, I think.
Okay, tell me about that, because that's literally my next question is, were you scared? And you just answered it, yes.
Terrified, really scared. I had never not been working. In fact, I've been working since the age of 14 and in this space too. So it's been, I'd been a really long time, and I just was so scared. And there had always been consistency with my parents and their jobs. And, they were the ones that had like worked at the same job for 40 plus years. And it's like,
yeah,
gosh, yes, I was scared. Very scared.
So what was your life like before you left and after you left? Like, how did it change?
Yeah, well, when I was working, again, I had stuff running, on the side as a creative outlet. I was more glued to my phone, and, I was also in the public relations space, which was very much so like you always on. So it was very stressful. There was even one point when I first took this job, and I took it actually to have more work-life balance. And I thought that I was actually going to be, less stress. And then I was like, I'm not even an anxious person. And I was like, because I am like panicked, this is crazy. What did I do? Gosh, this was a bad move. But anyways, so it was like that. And even when I had that one day off, I just felt guilty about having that one day off, and people were still, contacting me, and then I'm making 80% of the pay. So that kind of sucked. But, again, I was grateful that I could kind of feel like I was making progress to getting out of corporate. How it changed when I left was, number one, I was wondering, how's my mental health going to be when I'm working or I'm not working and I'm just by myself trying to drum stuff up? Am I going to, hate it and wish I hadn't left? And there hasn't been a single day since I've left where I have regretted leaving, not one. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed was kind of funny is I'm like, my gosh, my house is like falling apart. You don't even have time to notice the little things, good and bad. But I would notice things where I'm like, how did I not see that before? I just had time to like take it all in. But I also had time for myself and to think about what made me happy and stop making decisions based on fear. And even I'm talking about like, somebody asks you to go and do something that you just didn't feel like a hell yes in the beginning anyways. And you're like, oh, cool. And then you dread it. And you're like, that is a waste of time or a waste of energy. So I just think it allowed me to become more in tune with things and people and what made me happy. And I started kind of documenting what brought me happiness. And then I just continued to try to do more of it. And then I started documenting things that didn't. And I tried to do less of those. So just gave me more time to think and to kind of redirect my time, my efforts, and my energy. And then slowly but surely, I became the most happy and confident and interesting person that I'd ever seen myself be.
I want to hear about that. Tell me about that. Tell me about that process. And I know you mentioned to me before when we talked your consulting business and how you grew that and how it was so successful. And I think that's just amazing. But you've also made decisions around that as well. So I would love to hear all of it. I don't know if there's a spot you want to start, but I think it's all really important and intriguing.
Yeah. So, well, I've done a bunch of different things since I left. But one thing that is kind of important, I guess, for anyone that's taking that step and is trying to create something of their own is to put definition into what it is you're creating. And, for the cottage businesses, it was company and cottage, and I had it positioned and I had a whole story and all the stuff and a look and a vibe, and that figured out. And then I created a gourmet market eatery with some partners in Saugatuck. And again, we worked through all of that, and it was a purpose-driven creation, and it was beautiful and wonderful and such a good experience to be able to, tap into my love for culinary and hospitality. And then the other thing that I was doing that was really bringing the money was building out a consultancy that was focused on helping failing brands be able to, rethink their product use and their brand look and feel and the positioning and even the audiences that they were connecting with, and get them distribution in retailers and online, and create, social ads and social shopping and working with influencers. I mean, everything that I had been doing in my corporate career, but then being able to do on a retainer basis for these different brands, and they were all in the health and wellness supplement space, which, at the time with COVID happening, that, whole online shopping totally took off. So again, kind of like great place for me to be in, and very grateful that I could do it all remote. And so I've been doing that, about 5 or 6 years. And I'm still doing, I've actually been ramping that down just because it became a little bit, on one hand, you want the repetitiveness and the retainer, but then on the other hand, you're like, okay, now I've gotten to a place where I'm not growing and I'm not excited or creating anymore. And so, I knew I wanted to join boards, and I knew I wanted to help build things. And now I'm back in the startup space working with, one of our mutual friends, and it's wild and crazy. And I'm like, wow, am I 20 again? This is like, I thought I was trying to slow down, but I've got a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, and I guess a lot more of a candle to burn. So
that's fantastic. Okay. So one of the things that I think holds people back is that fear and putting caps on what they think they can achieve, what success looks like, financials. How did your income change from when you were working in your corporate job to when you were doing your consultancy? When you left corporate?
Well, I was already doing really well in corporate, and I quadrupled my income.
And that is not something I think most people even think is possible, right? Yeah. Did you expect that, or were you surprised by that outcome?
I guess surprised in hindsight, but it kind of happened incrementally. So I was like, yeah, of course I should be making this kind of money, And it's like, I love when my mom says to me, I don't understand what you do. Why do people pay you so much? And I'm like, that's just, your mom. She also has gotten to be a much better writer. And somehow she finds a way to accidentally insult me. She'll be like, I was telling somebody their kid was struggling in school and doing so bad. And I said, oh, you should see how bad my daughter did. And she's terrible. And she's, look at her now. It's so funny, but that's fine. You know what? It's an interesting path. And it does actually give me a little bit of, I'm less panicked about school stuff with my kids, because I know that so much of success is around mindset and being entrepreneurial and just being able to, problem solve and connect with people. And so if you've got those, 4-ish things, you're good.
That's fantastic. If you had to choose between happiness and success, which would you choose? And has that changed over time?
That's a good question. I would definitely say happiness. There have been many times where I have had an opportunity to make money that just, I knew it wasn't worth it to me. So I value my happiness more than I ever have. And I really will. I'll think like, if I could make a couple extra $1,000 by doing X, I'm like, it's not worth it. I've increased the value of my happiness. and I say no to a lot more. And what ends up happening, which was funny, is like I look at it maybe in a strange way, but I look at it as a little bit of a challenge from the universe of like, are you going to take the bait and take the money and know you're going to get into a bad place? Or are you going to actually continue to progress? And so I will be like, I'm going to pass this. And the answer is no. And then we all get a little reward where something else will come in where I'm like, oh, this is a better way to, be happy and make money. So it's just funny. I just refuse. I will not work with people who are jerks and drain me. I'm really picky. I will turn down work all the time, but in doing so, I attract the most incredible opportunities and people. I mean, even meeting you, like Jeff's like, oh, you're going to love Vanessa. You guys have got to meet. And I've met more.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. I have met more awesome people in the past like couple of years than I have in my entire life. And that's because I think that it's like a magnet, you attract interesting, vibrant, passionate people when you're in that space and mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So this is a little bit of a veer off because I really want to hear about your spiritual journey and the advisors that you have. I'm so curious about this.
Yep. So my spiritual journey kind of started, I would say, when I left corporate America. That's the time that I really could sit with my thoughts. And when you truly allow yourself to observe your life almost like it's not yours, out of body experience, if you will, you're able to then take the time that you need to work on you and your mindset and your beliefs and also get really raw with the things that you think just really suck about what you've been doing and your mindset. And you're like, ooh, gosh, I don't like that I do that. It's hard. It's hard. I remember having multiple times conversations with myself where I was like, that's your ego. And I'm like, I always like to say I don't have an ego, but everyone does. And it's just being more attentive and recognizing that. Or like, oh, that was a white lie. Why'd you say that? You didn't have to say that. Oh, you didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so it's like, I just started kind of paying attention to how I was feeling and how I was behaving. And so some of the things that I started doing to get back to your question, number one, I realized that actually I was vibrating at a lower level. And I'd heard that than I had the ability to, or anyone has the ability to. But I met with a handful of different, clairvoyants and psychics. So one of the things that I found really insightful when I was having conversations with a clairvoyant, actually, who was getting frustrated with me for, asking for the answers. She said to me, that when you have those things pop into your head, that's actually a message from your spirit guides. And it's, and so many times you kind of just ignore them or, forget them. And the reality is that they're popping in your head for a reason, and you should listen to them and you should take action on them. Because they're a gift from above. And so it's so interesting to me now. My perspective is when I have little things pop in my head, I'm like, I guess you should do something with that, So it is pass that along because I have those things pop in my head all the time. And I'm like, where did that come from? But then like, why brush it off? It's a great idea. It's interesting. And it came out of nowhere. But so I always think of, it's a little like clue or a little, treasure that I should be responding to.
I love that. It's a great point.
And when you start to hear the same things over and over, you're like, maybe I am being too controlling, and maybe I am worrying about money too much, or maybe I am like not sharing my own experiences and I have an opportunity to help other people evolve. But in order to do that, I have to evolve myself. So I kept hearing a lot of those things repeatedly. And my best friend was always like, yep, they're right. Yep, you've got those problems. You got to work on them. And it's just really, really hard I think in addition to that, I was realizing too that some of the people I was spending time with or the things I was doing wasn't bringing me happiness. And I also, as a female, not just a little side note here, as a female who's doing some interesting stuff, not everyone's going to be happy for you. It can make other people who aren't in a good space feel bad about themselves. And so that sucks to feel like you can't ever share anything that's going on with you, because then you're having surface level conversations, but you don't want to make people feel bad. And so what I realized though is I just wasn't hanging around my people. And that's really what that was. But it was really hard to kind of get to that point. So some of my rituals are, and I do them every single day. I'm really, really, really serious about them. I go on a 3-mile walk with my husband every single morning. It's called our gratitude walk. And we walk all the way down to the beach and back. And when we get there, on the way there, we talk about anything that's like stressful or frustrating that we want to leave behind. And then we are to our like stopping point and we practice gratitude and thank the universe and God and spirit guides and angels and all the stuff. I'm inclusive of all of them. So I'm like, I don't know who all's doing what you're doing, but what I say it to everyone. And
I love that. That's
what I do.
fantastic.
I go through the list, like, your kids, and I gotta make sure I cover off on everyone. And then on the way back, we talk about dreams and ideas and things that we want to do and experience. And so it's a daily ritual. And I have a little some mugs I brought back from Denmark that are not travel mugs at all. And I get a lot of negative feedback on why do you walk with them? But the reason I walk with them is because it takes me back to a place that I had a wonderful experience traveling to. It makes me happy. And it's like, I don't care what the social norm is. This little pink tiny mug, and I almost finished my tea before I even crossed the street to start my walk. I don't care. It just makes me happy. So I do that. I do an emergency meditation if I have a bad attitude, or I'll say to myself, I'm going to fire you until you get in a better mindset, and then we'll see if you get your job back. So I have a with myself. But yeah, I'll do a quick 10, 15, 20 minute little, even if I'm super slammed, which I usually always am, I will get out of that mindset so that I can work more effectively and more positively. Let's see. I have.
Let me ask you one question about that, because that seems like an amazingly helpful tip. But I'm curious about what is that negative? What does that mindset look like? Is it inward or is it outward, or is it variable?
It's inward, and I don't want it to go outward.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's why I just and it's really bad. If I'm in a bad mood, and let's say I'm just talking to my sister and I'm being negative about something. I'm I just don't like that version of myself. I don't want to be that person. And then I'm even more frustrated. So I'm might as well squash it. And I do believe too, if I am negative about something and I'm out and I'm why is it raining or whatever, then all of a sudden I'm hit traffic. I can't find a parking spot. I can't do this. I just started tracking all bank calls and says, oh, fraudulent activity on your card, whatever it is. It's I just attract that stuff. When I am positive, a guy randomly stopped on the side of the road, gave my dog these 2 big, treats. And then I find a parking spot, and then I get invited to some wonderful thing. And I just have a great conversation with, a stranger. All these great things happen. So I work really hard at staying in a good mindset. I have to get enough sleep. Otherwise I'm an absolute wild boar and a terrible human. So, and then I collect a few crystals, which I know are people think are weird. I don't care. For me, it's just I love things that I love, and I make them part of my routine and rituals. And when they bring you happiness, I see numbers. I always see number 11s everywhere. And to me, that is a reminder of I'm on the right path. I literally will pick up my phone randomly, 411, 211, 611. It's always 11 miles, or I've got 11 miles left in my gas tank, which is dangerously low. But I always see 11s. And actually this is a this is a good little kind of tie actually to my startup. When I was wondering if am I going to take this job, or is this, I don't know, what should I do? Again, it was a risk, because now I'm like, I went from here to here with my finances, and then all of a sudden I'm going to come back here and give it a go for a bigger, reward at the end. And I was wondering if I should do it. And I had a call with my partner, and we were looking at the CAB board, and we were looking at all of the equity available. Guess what the number was? 11, or whatever, how many millions of equity that was available. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to do it. And that was like my Virginia moment. When in doubt, if I see a sign, I move.
Yeah.
And then just a couple other small things with my spiritual. I read some different books. I listen to different podcasts. Like I like to listen to Jay Shetty or Mel Robbins. I've got Kyle Gray, who has some books called Angel Prayers. Learned about him and when I was traveling internationally, and he's from the UK. So I listened to a lot of that stuff, and I still talk to, I call them my spiritual advisors. I still talk to them probably a couple times a quarter, as like when I need a reset. And what else? Oh, I journal. I hate journaling, but I have to. I was told that I will have way more positive momentum if I'm able to journal my thoughts and feelings. And so I do it every single night.
Oh, wow.
And I sleep with a silk sleeping mask and a crystal in my hand. And then I do my kind of like nighttime and morning routines with my supplements to keep my hormones in check. Now that I'm an old, mature woman going through perimenopause. And then I make sure to make time for doing activities like playing paddle and tennis and going on walks with friends and travel. And it's hard to jam it all in, but if I don't do that, I start to feel like I'm being controlled by a corporation again. And the reality is I'm my own corporation and my own boss, and I shouldn't allow that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, question on the crystal. Is it always the same crystal? Or does it change?
Yeah, I do have 5, but I have one that for some reason I have a special attachment to. And I lost it for a little bit, but I read somewhere that if you lose it, it's because you didn't need it. So it's been found, so I must really need it right now.
Is that the one that you sleep with at night?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's cool. What kind is it?
It's a clear crystal. It does have an official name, but for now, we have to call it clear crystal. And once I get off the phone, I'll remember.
You'll let me know.
Yeah,
that's usually how it works. That's amazing. I love that you put so much intentionality into your routines and helping get your mindset on track and then keeping it on track. On the advisor front, I know you mentioned the psychics, the neurologists. Is there any sort of path that's helped more, or is it just kind of the combination of all of it?
Well, I'm currently talking to, I'm trying to think what she would call herself. She is a doctor. She's a neurologist, but she also is connected to spirit guides, which totally freak people out. But the reason this one is kind of interesting is she's really hard on me. I'll call and she'll be like, "Why are you calling?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I just want to see if you've had any information to give to me." And she's like, "It doesn't work that way. You already know all of the things and you need to listen to your own intuition." And so our conversation ends up being a lot about, and I actually got really kind of annoyed with her one time where she was like, "There you go again, trying to control things." And I was like, "Dude, what? Come on, like get off me." And I was like, and I was even trying to be, good. And I was like, "Be really careful what you say." Okay. She'd be like, "There you go again." And it's like, oh my gosh. So she's been really hard on me. But it's kind of the voice of reason of what you need to hear, because as much success and progress as I make, it's very easy to start like getting into that like place of fear and like, well, scaling back, or maybe I shouldn't. So that's kind of why I also continue to speak to that particular one is because she keeps holding me accountable. And then the other ones that are a little bit more like, oh, wow, something exciting ahead. And then it tricks my brain to think, oh, so you don't know what's ahead. So stop trying to figure it out. Just go. But one thing that actually also helped me too, is I have been told by multiple people, and, maybe they say it to everyone, but it really helped me, is I'm the most protected person, or I'm one of the most protected people, that I will not truly fail.
Yeah.
And that there will always be, something there to catch me. And so I always try to remind myself, I'm like, they said that everything's going to be fine. So you don't need to worry. But yeah, those are the main types of folks that I see. And then I enjoy Reiki and other things. But I will say this, if anybody is thinking about going down the spiritual path, if you are closed-minded, don't waste your time or money. You will not go anywhere. You have to be open-minded.
I guess you've seen that happen. It seems like you have experience with that.
I've seen, two different types of friends be like, oh, that sounds interesting. Then they go in, they're like super skeptical, and they're like, well, they didn't say anything. They didn't get anything. I'm like, well, and then you see another friend who's super open-minded, and she's like, that was crazy. Oh my gosh. Can't believe they knew that. Or then 6 months down the road, they're like, they were totally right. That's so crazy. So just got to be open-minded. And I would say that in life in general, just not just for spirituality stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you one more question that's not on this list, because you mentioned perimenopause. You're in your 40s, right? I think 47. Yeah. Okay. I'm almost the same age as you. And I'm not sure, how did you know you were in perimenopause? How did that happen?
Well, I had gotten a little sneak peek into what could be my future self with an older, not super older, but 10 years older woman who was 10 years older than me. And I saw her turn into a terrible monster. And I was like, whoa, whatever is going on, I don't want that to happen. It really startled me. And then it was overnight, I was like, how am I pregnant? I was like, why am I feeling bloated and I'm gaining weight? And then I was getting in regressing. I was like, why am I in a terrible mood? And why am I sweating like a pig at night? And why am I not sleeping? And all of these things. And you're just like, this sucks. So it was all the signs. And then I was losing hair and I looked it up. I'm like, oh my gosh, great. I got all of the things that they said could be signs of perimenopause. And then most people do, you go to your doctor and you're like, hey, help. And they're like, oh, just throw this estrogen patch on and, take some, progesterone and whatever. I started actually ordering all these things online, like Happy Mammoth and all these things for people going through perimenopause and not having any real idea what was the problem and what would fix it. And actually that stuff was making things worse. So I was like, oh, now I'm even more worse off. But I quickly went to, again, a different type of neurologist who actually specializes in taking women's blood and really understanding where there are deficiencies. And not typically you're told, oh yeah, everything's in range. Well, that range is from 0 to 5 million. And it's but what's your optimal range? And so when I got to look at my own data, which, when you're in the industry I'm in, I've always been looking at data. I'm looking for insights, but never had those for my own health. And so when I was able to have that explained to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I understand so much more about myself. And then I got put on supplements and I've never felt better. And, I dropped the weight. I sleep great. I don't have night sweats.
Amazing.
Hair's better, doesn't look like it now, but it is. And my skin is much better. And I was actually drinking colostrum when we first started our call, which is the first part of a mother's breast milk, but this is actually from cow. And if you don't take it or haven't heard of it, it's kind of a miracle. So yeah, it's been a positive journey. And now she's got so much business that I can't get my blood rechecked very easily.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Clearly a need for it. A friend of mine recently invited me to this hormone workshop for women, obviously, of a certain age.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we don't know what the hell's going on. We know it, we know like she's a little bit older than me too. And it's like, okay, yep, we're going through it. We're getting there. We really need to prepare. And how do you prepare for it? So it seems like you figured it out, which is awesome.
Yeah, for now. And then, when there something else happens, I'll just try to solve that. But
yeah, but you have the skills, you have the skills to solve it. You'll find a way. What advice do you have for people who are trying to figure out what to do with their lives?
Well, I would first tell them to give themselves enough time to actually sit down and have a conversation with themselves or with somebody else where they start to kind of map out what things they like, what things they've always thought that they could like or be good at, or skills. Like sometimes you just need to get some stuff on paper because it's having a blank canvas or having a big question mark is really hard for people and it ends up being a roadblock. And then once you kind of get definition of some territories or themes, if you will, then it's taking action. That's the biggest thing. Now this, Chat GPT did not exist when I was going through this, but I'll tell you, just for fun, I was, typing in some stuff that I currently do that I want to do with like my life and it spit out like kind of a 5 to 10 year thing. And wow, that is so inspiring. I don't care if any of that happens, but it made me excited about, it actually took all of the things that I thought were big reaches and pushed them even further. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm an international da 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 da. And it's like great to just have a vision and believe in it and then take the steps. Again, with Chat GPT, then I had it broke down like actual steps to take short term and long term. And it's fascinating, but you can do that without doing that. You just have to think really big, kind of give yourself a focus and then come up with steps to take. And then you actually have to take those steps and then you have to not give up.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but find somebody that will hold you accountable. Find another cheerleader and people that believe in you and talk to other people who have done it.
Absolutely. That's great. That's awesome advice. I am curious, how do you surround yourself with those people?
By spending less time or no time at all with the wrong people. Because that's a starting point. Because if you're spending your time, that's hard. That's really hard. That took me like 2 or 3 years to kind of move on from like a group I was hanging out with. And not that there's anything wrong with them. I just knew that it was they weren't my people and it was taking up a lot of time and putting a lot of energy into something I didn't feel like I was getting much out of. And when I opened up more of my availability, if you will, and I was in more of that magnetic mindset and higher vibration, I just started attracting those people. That's all I can say is like, I didn't go out looking for them. They came to me because I had the room and I was in the right mind space to attract those type of people.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Of course, doing other things too, like, being around people to be able to, obviously staying in your mind
doesn't really help. Yeah. No, I know. It's so amazing. Like, my family and I just went on this 2-month road trip through just like west into 12 different national parks and had so many amazing experiences and met so many interesting people. And I mean, it seems so obvious, but I had that realization too, where I was like, wow, just getting out of the house and getting out into the world and going to these incredible places. You just meet so many interesting people that way.
It is true. And you can still meet, awesome people virtually, like meeting you. But again, it's by having conversations. So whether it's in person or, virtually, and just the networking thing. And not even, that's the one thing I will say is I'm very interested in this concept. And it just came to me the other day is I network without expectation. I'm not trying to get anything out of it. I network because to me, it's, collecting little bits of inspiration or clues or, there's so much that you get out of it that you would not even, grasp or connect if you didn't meet those people. So I think everyone's supposed to meet for reasons that they can never see and they might not see until we're on the other side of things. So.
Well, I 100% agree with you. And honestly, meeting you has been such an inspiration and so much of what you shared. I'm absolutely planning on following your lead. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to see what you're doing too. I mean, the world needs more of this, of connecting people and giving them a platform to share their stories in hopes that, it can inspire other people to take that next step and to not feel trapped, because there are so many ways out, but only if you take that first step. And so I'm so happy that you're doing this. And when I first heard about it, I was just thrilled for you and for myself and everyone else who gets to listen to all that you create.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really inspiring. I have three more questions.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have an ultimate plan or goal or vision for what you want your life to look like?
Yeah, I guess I do. Although I will say that I'm open to, I always say this. So anything that I manifest or put out there, I'm like, this or something better, I'm open to it. But I would say that, I see myself continuing to consult and help businesses, small and large, achieve their, greatness and be able to move forward and help them solve any challenges. And specifically in the health and wellness space, I also see myself probably sitting on some boards and being able to be inspired by other executives and big thinkers. I see myself doing a lot of travel, and I collect antiques, and I'm always creating, whether it's culinary or clothing or decor. I'm kind of a collector of things I love. I'll continue to do more of that. And building out, we restored an old barn in Michigan, and we are doing some additional work there. And then we want to build out in Montana. But I guess I just see myself continuing to create and to connect and to consult in some way, and making sure that I have enough balance between it all. Yeah. So that's kind of a super high level idea of what I'll continue to do. I'm kind of feel like I'm in my semi-retirement, which is, a little bit more of a pivot into starting to go down that path. But I know that there's exciting things ahead that I haven't come into yet.
That's so cool. I've been telling myself that lately too. My birthday is later this month. And so I'm like, I feel like I'm semi-retired. Is that okay to say? I'm going to be 45, but is that okay? Like, I think it's true. I love that you're saying that.
I like to hear myself say it, whether it's true or not, but
yeah. It's okay to do things still, but you don't have to put the pressure on yourself, to constantly produce.
Right.
I think it's just like a little bit freeing. At least it is for me to think about it.
Definitely is for me.
Yeah. What is the most liberating decision that you've made since leaving corporate that you would never have made before?
Oh gosh. Of all your questions you asked me, this one, I have to think for a second. I mean, I guess I would say, whenever you work for corporate America, they're like, we always choose the brands that we want to work with, and they have to be the right fit. I have never seen corporate America turn down any new business. They all say that, or there's kind of these big lofty goals of we want to create extraordinary experiences, but they aren't actually able to create them because they don't fix any of the roadblocks. So I think kind of these like empty promises and flat out lies, I just don't have to be a part of. And so I really, really, really at all costs, at loss of income, will turn things down, and I will figure out how to make things extraordinary. And so that's pretty liberating to me.
That's fantastic. Okay, last question. What is saving your life right now?
Oh gosh, wow, you've come in with a 1-2 punch. What is saving my life right now?
That question was given to me by someone I interviewed a few interviews ago, and I was like, that's a great one.
That is a great one. I mean, I guess it seems too easy, but my mindset.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely is everything. That and sleep, probably. And my supplements. But I mean, mainly, even without that, mindset number one.
Yeah, awesome. If people want to find out more about you and follow your journey and what you do, all the many things you do, how can they find you?
Well, because I have been more anonymous, I don't have myself out there as much. You can go to LinkedIn and you won't see much of what I'm talking about, or you can go to see some of my creations, companyandcottage.com, if you're curious about the end result of some of my ventures. And if you try to find any of my fashion stuff, I did it before much was on the internet. So you'll just have to trust me that all that stuff happened. And yeah,
Awesome.
that's where I'm at.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep. So,
is there anything else that I didn't ask you or that we didn't cover that I should have asked you?
no, I think you've given me a lot to think about too. Be thinking what else is saving my life, and some of the other questions that I'd like to spend a little bit more time with. But this is a great interview. I really appreciate it.
This has been 101 Ways Out. I so appreciate you taking your valuable time and spending it with me. I hope something in this episode made you feel seen, understood, and inspired. If you're looking for support taking the next step in your life, visit 101waysout.com and check out our 30-day program. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms and follow our social media. Spread the word. I look forward to seeing you next week and continuing to explore what lights you up.